Yeah, the first talk that I saw from Benjamin Netanyahu, it was almost like he couldn't keep himself from smiling. I don't know what he was saying. Apparently he was saying this is bad, this is, you got to stand by the government, you got to follow all the objectives we give you, make sure you do what you're told. Truth is, no questioning us, no fighting back to what we're saying. Look at all this bloodshed, you've got to support us. Just throw families and bodies on the news and show them as much bloodshed as they can. And again, they got no problem sacrificing their own people. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu is a Bolshevik Jew anyway. He comes from Europe. He's not actually an Israeli. He's not a Semite. He's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white-skinned. His real name's Mileikowsky. He comes from Poland. He named himself Netanyahu because apparently that's an ancient Jewish hero or something. So he kind of took that name on so it would inspire the people. And this is something he's been craving, something like this to happen, so he could declare open war. And he'll be remembered as the one who gained Gaza Strip, the one who kicked the terrorists out of Gaza Strip and won the war. And like I said, so many people in Israel think that's all it is. It's just a group of terrorists, and it's not. And again, pay attention and remember the fact that ultimately Hamas was put in power in Gaza Strip by Israel. And they put him in power as soon as they got in. They declared him a terrorist organisation, shut the place down. And every time Hamas attacks Israel, it provides Israel with another excuse to do weapons testing. They've tested dime ammunition on the civilians. Like some of the stuff we saw coming out of the war in 2014 was horrendous. Weapons that should never be used in a war. Just absolute brutality. War crimes, all of them. Now, all of the stuff they're doing is war crimes on both sides. But again, this has got to be done this way to portray Bibi as the hero, and to allow them to take Gaza Strip, possibly incite the Arab world into uprising as well around the world in all countries. And it's a very, very interesting time, folks. So hold on to your hat. Try not to get involved in being on either side. Just be on the side of freedom, be on the side of truth. And I'm not saying ignore the Palestinian people, I'm not saying ignore the Jewish people, I'm not saying support either one of them. Support the people, but not the system, not the war. That's where Kennedy's fallen down. RFK has put out his tweet and said, basically go in there and get them. Bad move. You could have said, hey, let's de-escalate this. Let's commence peace talks and try to create some dignity for the Palestinian people. And let's step back and look at the whole thing and ask how this happened to begin with. Israel's one of the most technically advanced countries on earth. That border around Gaza is one of the most secure borders on earth. How did this happen? Just by coincidence? And like I said, this whole incursion into Gaza that's happened now by Hamas, it's not possible for this to happen under normal conditions. Even Israelis that are there, that have worked in security, have said that it's not possible. There was a woman whose name escapes me at the moment. I'll see if I can find her name here. Just hang on a minute. She's on Twitter. Efrat Fenningson is her name. And she put out a great little report that I'll just play you a couple of little bits of here.
What happened? 2 years ago, there was a successful deployment of underground barriers with sensors to alert exactly on these kind of terrorist breaches. Israel has one of the most advanced and high-tech armies. How come there was zero response to the border and fence breaching? I cannot understand that. Personally, I served in the IDF 25 years ago in the intelligence forces. There's no way, in my view, that Israel did not know of what's coming. A cat moving alongside the fence is triggering all forces. So what happened to the strongest army in the world? How come border crossings were wide open? Something is very wrong here. Something is very strange. This chain of events is very unusual and not typical for the Israeli defense system. A point about the situation in Israel in the past few years, which I want to make, is related to, and those who follow me know that there's a general sense of insecurity in Israel. There's political and social instability and unrest. Public funds are being misused on agendas such as COVID, climate, judicial reform, abolishing cash, and many more. The current government is highly corrupt in my view, while the previous one was no better. I don't care about having a popular opinion. I care about exposing evil forces wherever and whomever they are. So to me, this surprise attack seems like a planned operation on all fronts. This is a failure to protect the people of Israel, for sure. Perhaps the biggest failure since the Yom Kippur War exactly 50 years ago, if not bigger. By the way, is it a coincidence it's exactly 50 years ago, almost on the day? The Yom Kippur War was on October 6, 1973. If I was a conspiracy theorist, I would say that this feels like the work of the deep state. It feels like the people of Israel and the people of Palestine have been sold once again to the higher powers that be.
Yeah, even she says this is not possible. This has all the hallmarks of an operation. And again, you've got to understand that Hamas was put in place by Israel. I'm sure there are people in Hamas who are absolute extremists. I'm sure there are people in Hamas who joined simply because they love Palestine and they want to be part of the resistance, who are actually good people as well. But I have no doubt that at the top and controlling areas of Hamas, it's just a faction that was created by the alphabet agencies and by Israel itself, by the globalists, by the cabal, by the cult, whatever you want to call it. It's all controlled. And this is going to provide Israel with the excuse it needs to go in and completely obliterate the Gaza Strip. We all know the history of when they came there and they settled the land in 1947, 1948. The State of Israel was declared, and they've done nothing but steal the rest of Palestine ever since. And you've got to put it in perspective. This is a war that's been going on, and land theft, and it's been completely one-sided, whereby the Israelis can steal whatever land they want, and if the Palestinians complain about it, they get called a terrorist. And that's been going on for 75 years now, so you can understand why these people are a little annoyed. And the whole concept of the Palestinians even being terrorists to begin with, they got that label from after World War II when the ships were arriving, and it's so complex. I mean, it goes back to before then. It goes back to 1933, actually, when Judea declared war on Germany in 1933, and Adolf Hitler, who was running Germany at the time, just said, I'm sick of this, I want you guys out of the country. And so he organised the transfer agreement, which you can look up, and there's a paper trail for all of this, and all the evidence is there. And he transferred at least 20,000 Jews, probably more, out of Germany, got most of the Jews out of Germany in 1933, and shipped them all down to Palestine with all of their assets, transferred all their assets out by way of farm equipment. It was very clever the way they did it. But they transferred all the Jews out of Germany and down to Palestine, and also gave them the equivalent of what would be $100 million today. And that's what set up the basis for modern-day Israel. That was actually funded by Adolf Hitler in 1933, before World War II even started. So when you look at the stories of them exterminating Jews in Germany through World War II, well, most of them left Germany in 1933. And you can look up the transfer agreement and you'll find all about that. I mean, that's what happened. We even trained them to live in the desert and all sorts of stuff. It's a very complicated story, but there's actually a book you can read by a Jewish scholar called Edwin Black, which shows you how all this went down. But anyway, and we know what's happened since then. After World War II, they claimed Holocaust and they went down there and they basically moved in. And when the ships arrived from Europe bringing the poor begotten Jews and all the woes that they'd suffered in World War II, bringing them down to move into Palestine, basically against the will of the Palestinian people. A couple of the ships were bombed when they came to the shore in Palestine, and this was blamed on Palestinian terrorists. And this was the first time this had ever really been coined, this phrase terrorism, It later came out, it was revealed through freedom of information and all that sort of stuff, that the bombing was actually carried out by MI5 or MI6, one of the two, and it was called Operation Embarrass. And they actually went and placed some bombs on the Jewish ships and blamed it on the Palestinians in order to garner world sympathy. And the second act of terrorism that we saw in the world, and the one that really catalysed painting the picture of a Palestinian as a terrorist, was the bombing of the King David Hotel, which I believe happened in July, I think, in 1946. And that really paved the way for what's going on in Gaza Strip today, because this is what painted the Palestinians as terrorists, when nothing could be further from the truth. The King David Hotel was actually bombed by a Jewish man called Benjamin Emanuel, who dressed himself up as a Palestinian and went in there, and I think they killed like 91 people. It was a pretty terrible bombing, and that's where the term terrorist really came from. Incidentally, Benjamin Emanuel is the father of the Chicago mayor, Rahm Emanuel. Funny how they keep it all in the family. But that's really what paved the way for what's going on today, in as much as that is what provided Israel, the new settlers, with the excuse they needed to claim they were continually defending themselves against Palestinians when they haven't been at all. What they've been doing is they've been aggressing against the Palestinians and stealing their land and terrorising for the last 75 years under the guise of defending themselves.